Bonjour et bienvenue pour cette rencontre du 21e FIFO, une table ronde présentée dans des conditions un peu particulières puisqu'en raison des conditions météo, on se retrouve dans la salle Mouria Veil et pas sur le Pepe à Hiro, mais peu importe le lieu finalement, hein, la qualité des intervenants feront tout à fait honneur à cette table ronde. J'ai donc le plaisir d'accueillir à mes côtés Verena Thomas et Jackie Kauli, qui sont toutes les deux les co-réalisatrices du film Tribal Sisters. Steven Dupont, réalisateur du film Kauli, A Place Where Nobody Enters, et Luigi Acquisto, co-réalisateur du film Circle of Silence. Leurs 3 films sont présentés en compétition de ce 21e FIFO et sont disponibles évidemment pour le visionnage en ligne sur notre site internet. Cette table ronde s'intitule « Impact et recherche de vérité dans le genre documentaire ». Elle sera menée entièrement en anglais. Et voilà, merci à tous pour votre présence. So, Yoran everyone, thank you for joining me and for joining us actually for this panel session of the 21st FIFO. This panel session is entitled Impact and Search for Truth in the Documentary Genre, and viewing all the films that were presented this year in the selection of the festival, we thought that it would be interesting to have together all your some of your insights on this subject. So I will start with you, Luigi. You're the co-director of the film Circle of Silence, and maybe it's of all your 3 films, maybe it is the film where it's the most obviously led on search for truth, because it tells the story of Shirley Shackleton, whose husband was one of the 5 journalists killed in Balibo in 1975 by the Indonesian army. And for almost 50 years of her life, she dedicated herself to find the truth, and led her own investigation as the Australian Federal Police abandoned their investigation. She did it first with a book, and then in this film, she brings new insights on the table. My first question would be how did the idea of the film came to you at first, and actually, what is the story behind the story?
The Balibo 5, the murders of 5 Australian-based journalists in Portuguese Timor in 1975, is a story that's quite well known in Australia and has been for a long time. But the facts of the killings have always been unclear, and that's because both the Australian government, the Australian media, the Indonesian government have deliberately lied about what happened. So there's always been a tension in Australia between wanting to know the truth, what actually happened, and what we're being told by official channels. And Shirley was sceptical from the very beginning, and immediately after the men were killed, I mean, she started a journey which was to discover what actually happened, but also in time became an advocate, a very strong advocate for the liberation and the freedom of Timor-Leste. The story behind the story is that my co-director, Lourdes Pires, was in Timor in 1975. She met Greg and the other journalists. She was very young, she was 17. She was part of the Fretland youth movement. And so she'd been to Balibo shortly before the men were killed, and they then left because of there were bombings in that area. But she met the journalist in Dili, and later was responsible when she fled days before the invasion. Her and her family actually brought back what the journalists had left, their books, their diaries and so on, in the hotel in Dili, and brought that back to Australia. And that was then sent on from Darwin to the various families. A year later, Lourdes was in Darwin, and Shirley came to Darwin to be close to Timor. She couldn't go to Timor, of course. And the young Lourdes met Shirley Shackleton. And Shirley gave Lourdes, and Lourdes always says this, gave Lourdes the strength, the courage to be an activist, to fight for her country. And a friendship started at that point. I went to Timor in '99, shortly after the referendum, and developed a passion for telling stories about Timor-Leste. We made a number of documentaries for the ABC in Australia, SBS. We worked on the feature film Balibo, which was a fiction film, and that piqued our interest in the story and in telling the story comprehensively. So through Lourdes, her friendship with Shirley, our knowledge of Shirley, we approached Shirley and decided that, asked whether she would be the subject of the film. And we focused on Shirley rather than other families because we felt that we wanted to tell a singular story that was dramatic and follow her journey. And it is a cold case investigation, and that's disturbing. I mean, it really shouldn't be up to an individual, a filmmaker, and other activists and journalists to be investigating one of Australia's most notorious mass murders. It should be the responsibility of the Australian Federal Police, the government, to do that.
There is a strong political, not strong, but I don't know how to say, but a clear political involvement in this story, after all. And my question would be to know whether if Shirley had any troubles, did she get in any troubles doing her investigations all along those 50 years, or even if you did have some blockage from the politics when you started making the film?
Shirley had a lot of interference. Shirley was a hero to many people. She was very outspoken, very strong, but she was also very savagely criticised by politicians, by the media. People would say, "You're just a housewife, why are you interested in this?" She was just seeking fame. She was trying to make a name for herself. So she was dismissed. One, for being a woman, I think, but secondly, for speaking out against the grain of what was official government policy, opinion, and much of the media were sycophants to the Indonesian lobby in Australia. So she was, took a lot of strength to keep going. And making the film with Shirley, I mean, over a number of years, we really understood just how much energy, stamina, resilience it takes to stick to an issue. And she did it for nearly 50 years. So she was criticised, both publicly, in writing, and one of the most remarkable events in her life, which isn't in the film but is in her book, was that in 1988 she actually went to Timor, and she was Timor was Indonesian, but it had just opened up to foreigners. Before that, it was a closed. It was closed off to the world. It was an island prison. And she went to the Turismo Hotel where Greg and the others stayed. And sitting there at the Turismo was General Murdani, who's the man directly responsible for the murders of the 5 men. And she braced herself and confronted him, surrounded by Indonesian military, a few Western journalists, and a lot of Indonesian spies. And he brushed her off, and she insisted and sat down and demanded to know why Greg and the others were murdered. He didn't answer, of course, but it took a lot of courage, and she was being followed. There was a lot of surveillance, and it was a very dangerous moment. So again, it just shows just how remarkable a woman she was and how courageous. We've had no direct sort of threats. We did film in Indonesia. We didn't have a permit. We were investigating one of the alleged killers and travelling around with his wife, who's Timorese, and grew up with co-director Lourdes, so we had that access. So there was always an element of risk there. But the response we've had generally has been positive from people who've seen the film and many involved in the issue, but sometimes the politics of it we've felt have affected the ability of the film to gain funding. It's been seen as quite a sensitive topic and still is in Australia. Public documents are still not released, or if they are, they're redacted. So it's still a topic that's quite politically sensitive, even with the current government.
Thank you for those answers. Just another question before I move to the others around the table. Shirley wrote a book about her dedication to the Balibo 5 case and the investigation she's been doing all along these years. And then comes this film. What kind of, or maybe, was there any impact strategy or impact production campaign organized around the book and the film, or either one of them?
Yeah, the book was published many years earlier, and it was a very good book. Shirley was always proud that it won a Walkley Award. The film, we always had an impact strategy, and that's still unfolding. So it really existed in 2 worlds. One is in Australia, so we're working together with a number of other Timor activists to see what pressure can be put to have the case reopened. It was dropped by the AFP because of political interference at the time. The grounds for the investigation being dropped weren't legitimate. And also, Shirley always wanted for the remains in the graves in Jakarta to be repatriated and tested to see what's in there, to discover the truth about that grave, even though she felt she did find out the truth from the testimonies of different people we meet in the film. The other, so that's trying to get justice for the Balibo 5. The other area that we wanted to have impact was in Timor-Leste itself. So Timor was occupied or colonised by the Portuguese for 460 years. Following that was a very brutal occupation by the Indonesians. So there's very little, out of that there's very little literature, few films, very little, there are very few resources that Timorese can use to understand their story. So what we've done with the film is that we've dubbed it into Tetum, one of the official languages of Timor-Leste, and that will now be touring the country through open-air cinemas, as we've done with the films we've made in the past, but also it'll be shown extensively on the national network, RTTL, through ABC International, as well as in the region. So we're moving forward slowly, but yeah, there's always been an impact strategy, and we're hoping to realise that fully in the future.
Yeah, kind of funny to see that after all the political blockage that you have during the making of the film, or that Shirley had during her investigation, finally, at the end of the day, it did help the impact of the story. Do you think that is correct to say that like that?
Sorry, that the political...
the political interference at the end of the day helped building the impact of the book and the film.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think that's true. And part of it was, you know, the other objective of the film. I mean, one of the responses we had when we said to people, we're making a film about the Ballabo Five, we're making a film with Shirley Shackleton, the common response is, we've heard it all before. The truth is that most Australians know nothing about the murders, the Australian role in the invasion of East Timor, because what they've been spun are lies and propaganda coming out of the Australian government, the Australian media, Indonesia, New Zealand, Britain, United States. So, and the voices that have attempted to tell the truth have often been ridiculed or drowned out, including Chomsky and others. So I think that, yeah, the search for the truth is a very important part of that film, to counter the sort of interference it's had before and put the facts forward, which most Australians thought they knew, but in fact didn't. And so it's been a real eye-opener, showing the film and having people who were very involved in Timor and yet not realising fully, particularly the role of our Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, who was, you know, a Labor Prime Minister, seen as a great saviour of Australia, fantastic on domestic policy and yet complicit in genocide, as were subsequent governments.
Thank you, Luigi.
Very welcome.
Stephen, so your film, Kauli, A Place Where Nobody Enters, is also being screened in the competition category, like Circle of Silence. And the film depicts the story of Albert Murray, an elderly man from Papua New Guinea in the Calgary settlement. Before going any further, could you tell us a little bit about this settlement specifically? Because we are used to speak about Papua New Guinea and Port Moresby, but we rarely hear about Calgary settlement or any other settlements in the city.
Yeah, well, Calgary is, from what I was told, is actually Port Moresby's oldest settlement. Geographically, I believe that because it's downtown, so it's almost it's the closest settlement to the original downtown area of Port Moresby. And now Port Moresby has become much bigger now, and downtown is sort of extended to other parts of the city, but the original part is very close, and it's also one of the biggest settlements as well. So historically it has great importance. It's in South Moresby, and the whole concept of settlements in Port Moresby and probably around the rest of the country is that these are places that they're a mixture of, and you can correct me here because I've got this lovely Papua New Guinean, but because I'm just the outsider looking in here, but basically they're made up of traditional landowners and new migrants that have come in from other parts of the country. So they could be from the highlands, or they could be from the Gulf, or various parts. So you do have this sort of melting pot of the traditional owners and also the newcomers, and that's often creating a lot of friction and tribal conflict as well. So you have essentially squatters that are coming in and taking over the land, and then it's complex because traditional landowners will also sell off their land to people as well, and so it's a complex situation. But these settlements are generally quite poverty-stricken. They're spread out around the city. I believe most people in Moresby probably live in settlements, actually. There's a lot of them. And they're essentially suburbs. And they're made up of these communities. And Calgary was the one community that I knew personally, because I'd worked there and photographed there for many years before I even started my film. So I actually had relationships with actually the main gang that was there, and they call them rascals, which is Tok Pigeon for criminal. And so you have these essentially criminal gangs that are kind of like a vigilante group that protect the community, but also go out and do raids and bring back money to put back into their families and so forth. That's a whole other story though. But that's where my beginning kind of occurred. That's when I first went to Calgary, I walked into a tribal war. A Highlander had speared a local Matuan woman through the neck and killed her, and that sparked off a tribal conflict. And I remember going into, at the time, the local MP was a woman called Lady Kiddu, and that was her constituency. And I remember because I was following her and doing a story on her, and we went into Calgary to try and break up the violence. And she was, quite a courageous woman, believe me. And that's where my relationship started, and I met the head of the gang, and so from there built up this, connection, and I wanted to do stories about this particular community.
Thank you. This Albert's story that is being depicted in the film is quite tragic, and without unveiling anything from the film, there's still. He has still a strong resilience after all what happens to him, and the living in the settlements with all basically the life in the settlements, and how does he cope with all of that?
I'm sorry, I missed the last.
How did he cope with?
Look, Albert. He's one of the strongest, most sort of giving, most humble and, inspirational people I've ever met. And he had an incredible presence within Calgary. He was an elder of Calgary. He was a chief from his own tribe, which is from the Gulf. So he originally came from the Gulf, was married to Kathy, who's actually Bougainvillean. And so they are a mixed race tribal family. And his stance in the community was very high. And I think part of the reason for Albert's position and popularity amongst his people was that his family they are one of the greatest sporting families in Papua New Guinea. The Muri family are very famous for producing national athletes for the country. Dia Muri represented Papua New Guinea in basketball, for example, and various other Muris played basketball or netball and rugby league. So you have this sports family that are really highly regarded and looked up to on a grassroots level, and also a national level. And I think Albert held that lantern for his people. He was not just a driving force and a role model for his own family, you know, he was this force for the whole community. And I believe that's why he took on the role as a coach of the local rugby league team. He always spoke to me and said, I'm only doing this to keep the kids away from crime, drugs, and alcohol. If I can get them into playing rugby league, that's going to stop them going the way of my sons. So 2 of Albert's own sons, without spoilers, go down that dark pathway. So Albert's family is Calgary, and he sees them as all his children.
Yes, that's really inspiring, yes, because I don't know if one day he'll know the truth, after all, about his sons and what happened to them. So that's also something quite tragic about him and his life. Yeah. But I wanted to know as well, impact-wise, what was the goal of the film at first? When you started doing the film, what was the objective behind this film?
Well, it's firstly very personal for me. This was a personal project that was self-funded. So I took on this project and put my own money and my own time into doing the film, without very little support at the beginning. And so, I would spend months in the field with them, with the Murray family, and covering different aspects around the film. But my goal was to highlight the struggles of this community and the struggles of this family, which is very real. And we're talking about truth here today and honesty. And I've always gone down the path my whole life with my photography, through journalism and now through filmmaking, to try and be a truthful person in the stories that I'm making. So this film needed to highlight the truth, and sometimes the truth is hard to watch. Life in the settlement is hard in Port Moresby. It's not a nice place. It's a very, very difficult place. It's very poverty-stricken. It has social welfare problems. It has no running water, clean water. It has very little electricity. I mean, the list goes on. No sewerage system. So I wanted to highlight these issues. I wanted to concentrate on the Murray family of being my main storytellers, to highlight the story of how a coach has the power to inspire these younger generations to become rugby league players and to try and stay away from crime against all odds. And me as the filmmaker has the ability to capture that story. My background of stories in Papua New Guinea have not always been very positive, and there is a slight redemption on my part when it came to making this film. I was feeling quite sad about a lot of what I was seeing before I made the film in past stories, and I wanted to highlight something positive within the context of what I was looking at and what I was experiencing. And rugby league was that shining light for me. Wherever I went in New Guinea, rugby league was the one thing that brought people together in peace. Yes, they went on the field and they tried to kill each other, but in the game, but it brought communities together, and not just players and men and boys, women too. I mean, it brings everyone together in a kind of a harmonious way. And when I saw that, I thought, this is the film to say, this is what can be used to make change. And this is an impactful thing we're looking at, and this is what, you know, I hope will not just show what's going on in Papua New Guinea, but highlight this is going on all over the world. This is not just a Papua New Guinean problem. And sport is one of the great things we have that has the capability of giving some little kid a dream, you know, hope.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And speaking of reality hard to watch, Verena and Jackie, your film Tribal Sisters is also being presented in the competition category. And yes, if there is one film that's showing reality hard to watch, I think yours would be in the top 3 maybe of this selection. Can you tell us a little bit about the context of how the film, how the idea begins around making this film, from both of your point of views?
Making the film really started with a project that we were working on how to address sorcery accusations and related violence in Papua New Guinea. And we looked at the way this topic was represented through the media and also internationally. And we felt that we wanted to not represent the horrific violence or sensationalize the issue, but really use film to understand potential solutions to the issue and give voice to those who are working really hard to address the issue. So we're very lucky to connect with an organization called Kup Women for Peace. And in particular, 3 women who are the main characters of the film, Angela, Mary, and Agnes, who are the tribal sisters, and who have had this, been this incredible women's movement in the highlands of Papua New Guinea to create peace in their own community. And the film really was our way of really understanding the issue of sorcery accusations deeper, to understand the impact of the issue, but also to share the stories of those who have experienced it and who are advocates and also human rights defenders in that space, to present the locally led solutions to the topic. So in particular, we really wanted to tell the story of the women because it is an extraordinary story, but it tells us so much in terms of what the solutions to this issue can be in Papua New Guinea.
And I'll add just a little bit to that one. And for Papua New Guinea, it's diverse, complex, and that film was shot in one region of Papua New Guinea. But important in that is highlighting the ways in which local knowledge was being used to create the peace, to address that. But most importantly, women. And women often are portrayed as passive bystanders. And yet, within that 20-year period to which there was war, and then leading up to the peace, these 3 women utilized strategies within the context of their being in order to create the peace that they had. Now, that's an incredible story. And women have led movements like that, but are often removed from that eye, intentionally so. And that was also, I think, another motivation for that. Thank you.
Okay, and the film follows 3 women from Kup Women for Peace movement. They are all so charismatic, and they bring a special drive to the story and the film, obviously. And I was wondering how their own features would be, how does it participate in the dynamic of Kup Women for Peace and the strategies they have developed along the years for their goal?
So just to understand the question, how the film is part of...
No, I mean how the three characters, how there's the strategy of Copenhagen for Peace or is influenced by them. I mean them
Yes.
as women.
Yes. I'll start and then Jackie can add to that. I think that one of the things, and this is how this film starts off, is understanding their own experiences as individuals and the impact that they have had from the tribal fight and sorcery accusations. So, and as very young children actually, but growing up in this space where there was a lot of violence. And so, and the other thing to mention is that in this movement of thinking about how they could create peace, they had to risk their lives because they were from enemy tribes and they were not supposed to even meet or see each other. So they were incredibly innovative in the way they developed their strategies. And, but I can mention one or two of them. One is that they worked through other women to create this movement, but also through their sons, the sons of those women who provided protection and who were the younger sons. And some women had lost their sons to the tribal fight. And so slowly, others, they were able to get others on board because of the huge impact that the violence was having in their community.
Small thing to add to that one. I have a favorite line that Agnes says, you know, and that was when they came to a peace building. And she said, you know, what did the men have? They had no choice. They had to follow us, you know, because that was it. And that's exactly what happened because the women said no to everything. And so when they moved, the men had to move with them and to create that peace. And so for me, that is powerful in itself, given that they were enemy tribes, given that they motivated an entire Kup Valley to create that peace. And it's significant because then others also within PNG looking at that and having that story being told to others was also in itself is a powerful thing as well. Yeah.
Your film is also a strong film to that calls for impact strategies. I mean, it's almost obvious when you see it. Have you designed in the pre-production process? Have you designed that kind of strategies? Yes. If you can...
Yes, certainly, because when we started the project, the idea was that we are creating a film that can resonate with others and that can create an impact across Papua New Guinea to understand more deeply the issue of sorcery accusation-related violence, but especially the solutions and acknowledging the work that human rights defenders are doing in that space. So, I mean, one way around impact that we see is always when we work closely with organizations that are doing this kind of advocacy work, we're really involving them in the process of making the film. So many decisions and negotiations in the way we build relationships are with them, because ultimately the goal is that this film can amplify their voice and their advocacy that they're doing. So it was definitely a clear strategy. And you know, one of the larger strategies perhaps is that they would really like to see more protection and security for the work that they're doing. And they're really advocating for the establishment of a Human Rights Commission in Papua New Guinea. So we see the film as, you know, it's a story of 3 women that are fighting this fight, but there's a long-term goal to it that looks at policy changes and looking at, you know, the changes that the government could make to really achieve a larger impact.
And from the very beginning, because it's a 4-year project, in the beginning was around a collection of digital short stories. And then in that, then building that relationship with them. So when it came to the actual product, which is the end part of the film, having the communities already being a part of that process and giving that out. And of course, there were dissatisfactions and things that are there, but working with them in that way from the beginning over a period of time enabled the film to also go out and for them to use that and for them to share it within their families. So that was also, I think, built in from the very beginning of the project. Thank you.
And speaking of Coop Women for Peace, nowadays, what are their projects, and yes, what are they up to now?
Yeah, so many things. I think they're always busy, and they've always been busy because they're the first people that people call when there is an issue in the community. And they work very closely with the police, of course, but often they receive the first call because there's that trust from the community members. We worked with them to also tell their story of impact that they're having through these digital stories or other means and other documentation, and also work together so they could receive direct funding to their organization to have their work supported. So so some of that was successful, and they continued to do the work in the community to mediate, to address cases, different kinds of cases, whether it's around gender-based violence or sorcery accusations. And they're also part of various committees at the national level now to raise those issues. And so they're very busy advocating, and as they always have been. But I think that the film and media plays a particular role in providing further tools to advocate stronger. And one example perhaps is that we developed together a toolkit which is called Communicating the Law, which is really facilitating conversations in communities to shift some of the perceptions and understanding around these issues. And they're very busy facilitating that, and there's a lot of demand from communities also to have these conversations.
Just in addition to that one of the things that I think what we like about them now is that they're celebrated for the knowledge that they have. Sometimes, often in the work that they do, they're not necessarily, they're just doing other people's work. But now people look at them and think, this is where knowledge is situated. This is where we can use them, and they are contributing to that and being valued for that. Thanks.
Sorry, I have one last question for all of you, and it was, did you screen the film in Papua New Guinea, and how did the audience react to the screening? So yes, Jackie or Verena first.
I go. You go. Okay, I'll go. We screened it in different parts of the country, in their home province and in Port Moresby. And I'll speak to Port Moresby. We screened it at the University of Papua New Guinea to student audience and to others. And it was well received. But the beauty about it also was that they had a panel, and all of them were sitting there, and they were able to answer questions that university students, young people, were asking as well. So that was great. And they've often felt that because they're community-based, that they don't necessarily have the knowledge, but they were talking to university, being in a university, and that they just enjoyed themselves so much.
Yeah, and in that screening also, apart from like community members and university students, we also have donor agents from international development and government present. And I think it was very much appreciated also by them. As Jackie has said, sometimes there's this idea that there's external support coming and that fixes things, but we're not looking enough at the solutions that are already there. And even if we go back in history, the long investment that people have in their communities, and in this case it was women in a patriarchal society being able to speak publicly, make decisions, and gaining that respect from their own community, which is very much a foundation to what they're doing now. And we wanted to tell that history because often we might have agencies coming in and working towards gender equality, but not knowing that there is a very strong foundation that people have already built through women's movement. And I think that was very much appreciated by these agencies and government in the audience as well.
Steven, have you screened this film your film in Calgary already?
No, I have not. I've screened the film to the family because I wanted their blessing before I screened the film anywhere else. We had a conversation about that, and that's still ongoing. Ideally, I would love to show the film in Calgary. I think it'd be wonderful. I think we may have the chance to do that. And I'm in the sort of conversations about that happening, as well as showing the film around the world, as obviously to highlight that situation as well. I mean, it's so far been shown in just a few festivals, including yours.
Byron Bay.
Byron Bay International and Prague One World International Human Rights Festival and FIFO.
And FIFO and Byron Bay, where you won the Best Feature Award.
We won Best Documentary, which was an incredible surprise. It was judged by the great, her name is Marianne Margolyes, who's a British actress and also documentary filmmaker. So, yeah.
Thank you. And how about you, Luigi? Have you been able to screen the Circle of Silence in Timor already?
Yes, we've had 2 screenings of the English version, of the English language version of the documentary in Dili. They went very well. It was launched by the president, Jose Ramos Horta, who knew Shirley very well, and of course knew 3 of the journalists, Greg and his 2 colleagues from Channel 7. And it was, very, very positive screening. In Timor, the story of the Balibo 5 is very well known. They're seen as Timorese, as martyrs who gave their life for freedom. There's not a division. It's a very embracing, generous culture. Shirley is seen as someone who's done a lot for Timor over the years and advocated for independence. So that part of it was people came to the film with that understanding, that way of seeing the journalist and Shirley. But what was a surprise for many was some of the historical information in the film which many Timorese weren't aware of. They've always seen Australians as great friends, but were surprised that the Australian government in the past hasn't always been a great friend to Timor-Leste. And in the future we'll be, as I said earlier, showing the Tetum version widely throughout the country and on television.
Yes, I didn't ask if you had any projects for the film after, this year or next year, Steven? Do you have any screening projects for this year or next year, aside from screening it at Calgary?
You mean new projects or the project now?
No, for Calgary, for the film.
Some future some future festivals and
yes.
things? Yeah, I would love to show it in more festivals. Definitely. That's something that I'm hoping being here will help that as well. And also I'm looking for a broadcaster and distribution. So all of the above. So yeah, it's still early days for the film. I hope it has a lot more legs. I hope it can really go out there and ultimately get it to Papua New Guinea as well.
Thank you. And Jackie, Verena?
Yeah, same for us. I guess we're always trying to reach as many people as we can, especially in Papua New Guinea, and we want to really get it into schools and continue having conversations using the film, as well as having the women participate in these conversations in PNG and overseas. But coming to FIFO is always fantastic because we get the platform to have conversations with broadcasters and other festivals to see where else we can take it. And it's a little bit of a jumping off board for us to kind of say, okay, where else can it go? And we definitely would love to see it screening across the Pacific and really hearing from others too, how the story relates, maybe to other tribal societies and also to the issue of sorcery accusation and witchcraft-related violence, and hear from other groups of people that might have experienced this issue as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to all of you. It's been a wonderful time with you, and well, good luck for the last few days of the competition. And again, thank you very much.